When Maya said her one who got away was moving back to the States, her tone was casual, as if she were merely telling me to pick up an extra steak for dinner. I smiled and said that was fine. I even volunteered to drive to the airport and organized a welcoming dinner at a steaming, authentic Szechuan hot pot spot downtown. At the table, they chatted effortlessly, drifting from old college poetry to the philosophy of life. I sat there like an extra on a movie set, quietly poaching beef slices for them. When the check finally came and the man reached for his wallet, Maya beat him to it, tapping her phone against the terminal before he could blink. She looked back at me with a grin, saying she didn't want a guest to have to pay. In that moment, looking at that familiar smile, something deep inside me went stone cold. Some things can't be smoothed over, no matter how much comfort food you put on the table. Caleb, Lucas is coming back home. Maya's voice drifted in from the kitchen, sounding thin over the roar of the range hood. I was sitting on the living room sofa, scrolling through a mind-numbing quarterly fiscal report. My fingers hitched for a split second at the name. Lukas Kent. The name was like a glass marble forgotten in a corner, dusty, yet still capable of tripping you up. He was the boldest stroke of color in Maya's youth, the name she'd mumble under her breath after one too many glasses of wine. He was the shadow that had hung over our 3-year marriage, visible but untouchable. He was her white moonlight. I closed my laptop and walked toward the kitchen. Maya was wearing the little bare apron I bought her, head down as she sliced tomatoes. The knife hit the bamboo cutting board with a steady, rhythmic thud. In the warm glow of the kitchen lights, her profile looked incredibly soft. Her long lashes cast shadows that hid whatever she was feeling. When's the flight? I leaned against the doorframe, my voice as level as if I were asking about the weekend weather. Tuesday afternoon, 3 o'clock, she said, her hands never stopping. He said, he wanted to see me. He should, I nodded. I walked up behind her, wrapping my arms around her waist and resting my chin on her shoulder. After all, you guys were close in college. It's been years. I'll go to the airport with you. We can't have you picking him up all by yourself. The knife stopped midair, the tip nearly nicking her finger. She went rigid for a few seconds before slowly forcing herself to relax. She turned her head to look at me, her eyes flickering with a mix of scrutiny and shock. You don't mind? I chuckled, pinching her cheek gently. Why would I mind? My wife meeting an old friend she hasn't seen in ages? Maya, I'm not that petty. My smile must have looked sincere enough that the sliver of doubt and defensiveness in her eyes melted into something like touched affection. She turned around, hugging me tight, burying her face in my chest. Her voice was muffled. Caleb, you're the best. I held her back, my hand lightly patting her hair, but my gaze drifted past her, out the window to the heavy darkness settling over Seattle. Was I the best? Maybe, but I knew better than anyone that the collapse of a dam usually starts with the most insignificant crack. Lucas Kent's return was that crack. I couldn't pretend I didn't see it. So, I chose to pry it open myself, to see if the inside was empty or already surging with hidden currents. On the day of the arrival, I intentionally wore casual clothes and drove our most average sedan. Maya sat in the passenger seat, wearing light makeup and a new cream-colored sundress. She was distracted the whole way, her thumb constantly swiping across her phone screen, likely confirming details with Lucas. I didn't bother her. I just drove in silence, the speakers playing the indie folk she loved. The music was soothing, but it couldn't quite mask the faint, electric hum of anxiety in the air. At 3:15 p.m., we stood by the international arrivals gate. Maya was on her tiptoes, scanning the crowd with an urgency I'd never seen when she was waiting for me after work. Soon, a tall figure pushed a luggage cart through the sliding doors. He was wearing a crisp white button-down, khaki chinos, and gold-rimmed glasses. He radiated a polished, intellectual charm. He spotted Maya instantly, a brilliant smile breaking across his face as he waved. Maya! Lucas! Maya practically jogged toward him. They stopped about 2 feet apart. No hug, but there was a palpable magnetic pull between them. You look exactly the same. You haven't changed a bit, Lucas said, his eyes lingering on her with unshielded admiration and nostalgia. Neither have you. Maya's cheeks were flushed. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, looking almost shy. I strolled up behind them, letting out a perfectly timed cough. Maya snapped out of it, quickly grabbing my arm to introduce me. Oh, Lucas, this is my husband, Caleb Thorne. Then she turned to me. Caleb, this is Lucas Kent. Nice to meet you, Mr. Thorne. Lucas extended his hand. His smile was polished, but his eyes did a lightning-fast sweep of me, from my sneakers to the unremarkable digital watch on my wrist. There was a polite condescension in that look, a well-hidden sense of superiority. Nice to meet you, Lucas. Welcome back to the States. I shook his hand, my grip neither too firm nor too soft. Long flight. Let's get you some food. We're taking you out for a welcome back dinner. I really shouldn't impose, Lucas said smoothly, though his eyes stayed on Maya. It's no imposition at all, I said before Maya could speak, my smile growing warmer. We're doing hot pot. Nothing beats that heat after a long trip. I know a spot in the International District that's the real deal. I'm sure you'll love it. I clapped a hand on Lucas's shoulder, guiding him toward the parking garage, intentionally ignoring his brief stiffening and the flicker of complicated emotion on Maya's face. Every showdown needs someone to pull the curtain. If that was the case, I'd be the one to do it. The place I chose was a hole in the wall in an old alleyway, gritty, loud, and thick with a heavy, mouth-watering aroma of spicy beef tallow. The moment Lucas stepped inside, his brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. He was clearly used to places with white tablecloths and hushed conversations. The decor is a little rough, I said, acting like I hadn't noticed his expression as I pulled out a chair by the window. But the flavor is unbeatable. Maya used to love these kinds of authentic, lively spots. I put a slight emphasis on the word used. Maya's expression shifted slightly. She forced a smile. Yes, lively. Lucas quickly adjusted his mask, returning to his gentle persona as he unbuttoned his top collar and sat down. When in Rome, right? I missed this kind of atmosphere while I was abroad. I waved over a server and boisterously ordered a split pot, half mild, half extra spicy, before sliding the menu toward Maya. Maya, you order. You know what Lucas likes. Maya took the menu and, without thinking, started rattling off items. Spicy beef, tripe duck intestines, and an order of the shrimp paste. With every item she named, Lucas's eyes brightened. When she finished, Lucas couldn't help but sigh. Maya, you actually remembered everything I like. Maya's face turned red again. She looked down, whispering, I just happened to remember. I took a sip of the bitter tea, my heart perfectly still. Of course she remembered, because when she ordered for me, it was always the same 3 or 4 basic things. I used to think that was our shorthand. Now I realized I was just living in the shadow of someone else's habits. The pot arrived, the red oil bubbling and the peppercorns dancing on the surface, releasing a domineering spice. I took charge of the cooking, dropping fresh ingredients into the broth. So, Lucas, are you back for good? Planning to build something here? I asked casually, stirring the pot to keep things from sticking. Yeah, life abroad was fine, but I felt like I was losing my roots, Lucas said, dabbing a bead of sweat from his forehead with a napkin, clearly struggling with the spice level. I'm opening a branch office here in Seattle. We're focusing on AI-driven venture capital. I'm sure I'll be asking for your insights eventually, Caleb. He said it politely, but the way he threw around AI and venture capital dripped with elite posturing. He was looking down at me, the average office drone. That sounds incredible. I praised him sincerely, placing a perfectly cooked piece of beef into Maya's bowl. For guys like me, that's all over our heads. Maya, you should really learn a thing or two from your old classmate. Maya looked awkward. She picked up the beef but didn't eat it. Lucas smiled, turning his gaze back to her. Actually, I came back partly to invite Maya to join the new firm. I remember back in college, you were a natural at project strategy. It seems like a waste for you to be doing administrative work at some small local company. The air at the table froze. This was a blatant attempt to poach my wife right in front of me. Maya's face went from red to white. She took a large gulp of water. Lucas, don't joke like that. I like my job. It's stable. Stable. Lucas acted like he'd heard a joke. He shook his head, his tone laced with a patronizing pity. Maya, that's not stability. That's stagnation. The Maya I knew wasn't meant to be stuck in a cubicle handling chores. She was meant to be in the spotlight. His words were like a needle, precisely pricking Maya's deepest insecurities. I saw her grip her water glass until her knuckles turned white. I didn't say anything. I just quietly dropped another plate of sliced ribeye into the pot. The red meat curled and changed color instantly in the boiling broth, looking like a scorched heart. Caleb, what do you think? Lucas suddenly threw the ball to me, a hint of a challenge in his eyes. I'm sure you don't want your wife's talent to go to waste, right? I looked up and gave him a wide, simple grin. Of course not. As long as Maya's happy, I'm behind her 100%. But our family situation might be a little different from what you're imagining, Lucas. I paused, dipping a piece of beef into my garlic and sesame oil sauce, taking my time. I'm not a high flyer. I don't make much, so I just want a simple life, a happy wife, and a warm home. Maya's job doesn't pay a fortune, but it's low stress and close to home. She can be back every day in time for us to have dinner together. I think it's great. I looked Lucas dead in the eye. After all, in a marriage, someone has to be the anchor, right? My words were a bucket of cold water on the ambitious fire Lucas was trying to light. I dragged his career heights back down to the reality of cooking dinner. I took the Maya he was trying to elevate and pinned her back to her identity as my wife. The smile froze on Lucas's face. Maya's expression worsened. She looked at me, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say something, but she remained silent. The rest of the dinner was an exercise in hidden daggers. For the second half, I did most of the talking, asking Lucas about his time in Europe, sharing anecdotes about mine and Maya's daily life. I talked about our weekend movie nights, how I was saving up for a house in a better school district, and how we were planning to start try for a baby next year. The more mundane and happy I sounded, the grimmer Lucas looked, and the lower Maya bowed her head. Finally, the marathon dinner ended. Check, please. Lucas waved his hand, pulling out a designer wallet with a flourish. Sir, the bill has already been settled, the server said with a smile. Lucas blinked, looking at me. Caleb, that was too much. I said this was on me. I shrugged, looking innocent. Wasn't me. All three of our gazes landed on Maya. She looked uncomfortable as she tucked her phone back in her purse. The screen was still on the Apple Pay confirmation page. She gave me a weak smile. I took care of it when I went to the restroom. He's our guest. We couldn't let him pay. She called him a guest. Lucas's expression was complicated, touched, but also knowing. He likely thought Maya was telling him she still cared. I looked at Maya, and she looked back at me, her eyes pleading for understanding. I smiled, warm, considerate. That's fine. It's the same either way. Come on. I'll drive Lucas to his hotel. The drive home was dead silent. Maya opened her mouth to speak several times, but thought better of it. It wasn't until we were almost home that I asked softly, as if I'd just remembered, Maya, how much was dinner? Huh? Maya startled. Not much. About $80. Oh, I replied, eyes on the road. Next time, let me handle it. Having my wife scramble for the bill makes me look like a pretty stingy husband, don't you think? My tone was flat, almost a self-deprecating joke. But Maya went completely silent. She knew I didn't care about $80. What I cared about was the intent behind her rush to pay, that desperate need to either clear her debt to him or prove something to him. She didn't want to owe Lucas, but she seemed to have forgotten that she owed me the truth. That night, we lay back-to-back in bed, not saying a word. I could hear her shallow breathing and the occasional rustle as she tossed and turned. I knew she wasn't sleeping either. In the dark, I stared at the ceiling. Some cracks don't go away just because you pretend they aren't there. They only grow wider with time, eroded by silence and suspicion, until the whole world falls apart. The following days were filled with an eerie calm. Maya was more attentive to me than usual. She got up early to make breakfast, handed me my slippers the moment I walked through the door, and took over all the housework. She was walking on eggshells, trying to maintain the balance of our home, as if the hot pot dinner had never happened. But I knew the currents were swirling beneath the surface. She started keeping her phone glued to her hand, the screen always facing away from me. She was taking more calls, always stepping out onto the balcony and speaking in a low, rushed voice before hanging up. Lucas was like a ghost, silently seeping into our lives. Wednesday afternoon, I was in the middle of a tedious project meeting when my phone lit up on silent. It was a message from the young receptionist at Maya's office. She'd sent a photo. In the picture, a massive, vibrant bouquet of blue roses sat on Maya's desk, taking up half the workspace. A few gossiping coworkers were huddled around, looking envious. The girl sent a voice note. Caleb, look what Maya got. Someone went all out. The card just says L. Was this a surprise from you? I traced the screen for a moment before typing back 2 words. It was. Then I locked the phone, tossed it on the table, and went back to listening to the project manager's droning report. The office AC was cranked up high, making me feel cold down in my bones. Lucas. He wasn't even bothering to hide it anymore. I didn't confront Maya. I knew that if I spoke, I'd only get her excuses and a bigger fight. She'd say it was just an old friend's joke, that I was overreacting. I didn't want to fight. Fighting is the most useless emotional vent in the world. It solves nothing. It just makes everyone involved look ugly. I chose to wait. I waited for a moment she couldn't argue her way out of. Friday came. Maya said she was going out for dinner with a girl from college and would be back late. Which friend? Sarah? I can drop you off, I said, loosening my tie. No, not Sarah. A different one. You don't know her, Maya said, her eyes shifting. She looked down as she stepped into her heels. We're meeting downtown. I'll just take the light rail. You've had a long day at work. Get some rest. With that, she hurried out the door, not even giving me our usual goodbye. I stood in the entryway, staring at the closed door for a long time. Then, I picked up my phone and made a call. "Hey, Gabe, track a plate for me. I need the real-time location." Half an hour later, I was parked in the underground garage of La Lune, the most expensive French restaurant in the city. My car was tucked into a dark corner, facing the elevator bank. 10 minutes later, a black Porsche Cayenne rolled in, pulling into a VIP spot. The door opened, and Lucas stepped out of the driver's seat. He was wearing a perfectly tailored dark suit. He walked around to the passenger side with practiced grace and opened the door. Then I saw Maya. She had changed out of her work clothes. She was wearing the champagne silk dress I'd given her for our anniversary, with a cream trench coat draped over her shoulders. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled to perfection. In the bright garage lights, she looked painfully beautiful. She'd lied to me. The girls' night was actually a romantic dinner with her white moonlight at a place like this. I sat in my car, looking through the tinted glass, watching them silently. Lucas gallantly offered his hand. Maya hesitated for a second before taking it. They walked toward the elevator side by side, the picture-perfect couple. My heart felt like it was being crushed by an invisible hand. I leaned back against the headrest, closing my eyes as the last 3 years flashed through my mind. Our first meeting at a friend's party where she'd gotten too drunk and I'd stayed up all night, making sure she didn't get sick. Our first date at a taco truck where she'd laughed with salsa on her nose. The day I proposed, no fancy ring, just the keys to a condo with a fresh mortgage. I'd been so nervous, my palms sweating as I told her, "Maya, I might not be able to give you the best of everything, but I'll give you everything I have. Will you marry me?" She had cried and said yes. Those memories used to be the warmest light in my life. Now they were jagged blades cutting into me. I pulled out my phone and opened a contact I hadn't messaged in a long time. "Mr. Sterling, regarding that West Side waterfront redevelopment deal. I've changed my mind. Let's meet at La Lune tomorrow morning at 10. I'm ready to sign." The reply came almost instantly. "Caleb, you're finally getting back in the game? Fantastic. See you at 10. I'll have the champagne ready." I put my phone away, started the car, and slowly drove out of the garage. "Maya, this was your choice." Now, it was time for me to pull back the curtain on the final act. The next morning, I didn't go to my usual office. I drove straight to La Lune. I had swapped my casual wear for a bespoke suit that had been sitting in the back of my closet for far too long. I'd spent time on my hair and strapped on a limited edition Patek Philippe. It had been so long since I'd played this part that I'd almost forgotten I was capable of it. At 9:55 a.m., I walked into the restaurant. The maitre d' took one look at me and bowed slightly. "Good morning, sir. Do you have a reservation? The name is Thorne. I'm meeting Mr. Sterling at 10. "Mr. Thorne, this way, please." His attitude became even more deferential. "Mr. Sterling is already waiting for you in the private suite." As I followed him through the elegant hallway, I paused for a fraction of a second near the main dining area. By the window, Maya and Lucas were sitting across from each other. They had a lavish brunch spread before them. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the scene look like a painting. Maya looked gorgeous, a soft smile on her face as she listened to Lucas. Lucas was gesturing animatedly, likely describing his grand business blueprints, his face full of unearned confidence. I looked at them for no more than 2 seconds before moving on, following the server into the VIP suite. "Caleb, you certainly kept me waiting." Inside, a middle-aged man with a receding hairline stood up immediately, reaching out to shake my hand with both of his. This was Bill Sterling, a real estate mogul in the Pacific Northwest. The West Side project was his crown jewel, but it had stalled due to a massive capital gap. He'd begged me to invest dozens of times, but I'd always turn him down, claiming I was semi-retired and didn't want a headache. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Bill," I said, shaking his hand and getting straight to business. "Do you have the contracts?" Right here, right here." Sterling pulled a thick stack of documents from his briefcase. "Caleb, I promise, every clause is exactly how you requested. Take a look." I didn't look at the contract. I just pushed it aside. "Bill, before we sign, I need a small favor." "Anything. Name it," Sterling promised, thumping his chest. I took a sip of lemon water and said slowly, "I need you to help me put on a little show." At 11 a.m., Sterling and I walked out of the suite, chatting like old friends. "Caleb, I can't thank you enough. If this project takes off, you're the savior of this company." Sterling's voice was booming, filled with exaggerated gratitude. "You're too kind, Bill. It's a win-win," I said with a faint smile. Our conversation successfully drew the attention of everyone in the dining room, including Maya and Lucas. I could feel 2 sets of eyes locking onto me like spotlights. I acted as if I just noticed them, my face showing the perfect amount of surprise. Maya? Lucas? What a coincidence. Are you two having brunch? Maya's face went ghost white. The silver spoon in her hand hit the saucer with a sharp clink. She stared at me, at the expensive suit she'd never seen, at the billionaire standing beside me, her eyes wide with shock and panic. Caleb? What? What are you doing here? Her voice was trembling. Lucas reacted faster. He stood up, and while he looked surprised, there was more scrutiny in his gaze. He recognized Sterling. Caleb, who is? Oh, sorry. Where are my manners? I patted Sterling on the shoulder, as if he were just some guy I knew. This is Bill Sterling of Sterling Heights Realty. We just finished up some business. Mr. Sterling, a pleasure, Lucas said, extending his hand. Sterling gave him a perfunctory handshake before turning back to me, his smile almost submissive. Caleb, I'll leave you and your wife to your meal. I'll get started on the West Side project immediately. Expect good news soon. With a bow to Maya and me, he scurried off with his assistants. The restaurant went so quiet you could hear a pin drop. All eyes were on our small table. I pulled out the chair opposite Maya and sat down slowly, looking at her and Lucas with a calm expression. Aren't you going to introduce me? What are you two talking about? You look so happy. Lucas's face had turned a sickly shade of gray. He wasn't stupid. Sterling's behavior, the way he called me Mr. Thorne, the way he practically bowed, said it all. The man he thought was a house husband he could push around was someone he could only hope to look up to. Mr. Thorne, Lucas stammered, his tone shifting completely. He forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. I had no idea. Maya and I, we were just reminiscing about college. Is that right? I looked at Maya. Her lips were bloodless, her hands clutching the tablecloth so hard the fabric was bunching. Maya, didn't you say you were out with a friend last night? And that you're with a friend today? My voice wasn't loud, but it hit her like a sledgehammer. She flinched, her eyes turning red instantly. I. She opened her mouth, but not a single word of explanation came out. The shame of being caught in a lie, the shock of my revealed identity, and the guilt of her betrayal weighed on her like lead. I didn't press her. I simply reached into the inner pocket of my suit and pulled out a document, placing it gently on the table. The cover had bold, black letters. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Maya's pupils shrunk, as if she were looking at something terrifying. Caleb, you. I gave you chances, Maya. I interrupted, my voice cold as ice. From the day Lucas came back, from the moment you lied about picking him up, to the blue roses, to last night. I waited for you to be honest with me. Over and over. But you never were. You chose to lie. You chose to sit here with him, planning a romantic future. I turned to Lucas, who had instinctively stepped back, avoiding my eyes. Lucas, didn't you want to give Maya a better platform to show her talent? Now's your chance. I curled my lip into a cold smile. I'm walking away from everything. At the words walking away, Lucas's eyes flared with a brief spark of greed. Maya, however, looked like her soul had been scooped out. She collapsed in her chair, tears streaming down her face. I stood up and looked down at them. But let's be clear about one thing. The house we live in, every car I own, and all the stocks and investments in my accounts are premarital assets. My legal team has already verified the trust. When I say I'm walking away, I mean I'm waiving my right to my half of our community property, the stuff we earned together in the last 3 years. Our joint savings account has about $30,000. Per the agreement, you get 15. Also, that car you're driving, it's in my name. I'll be taking the keys back. My words were a scalpel, peeling back the bloody reality of the situation. The spark in Lucas's eyes died instantly, replaced by a look of sheer horror. Maya had moved from silent tears to choked up sobbing. Caleb, she reached out to grab my sleeve, her voice broken. Please, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Just give me one more chance, please. I looked down at her, at the face I had loved for so many years. I used to think that if I gave someone my whole heart, I could warm a stone. Now I realized hearts aren't stones. Stones don't have feet. They don't run away. But hearts do. A chance. I gently but firmly pried her fingers off my sleeve, one by one. Maya, the moment you chose to lie to me, you used up every chance you ever had. I pulled my sleeve away and gave her one last look. There was no tenderness left, no love. Just an exhausting, hollow disappointment. Sign the papers. Don't make this uglier than it already is. I turned and walked out without looking back. Behind me, Maya's sobbing turned into a scream, and Lucas stood there with a face full of shifting shadows. The sun was still bright, and the restaurant's piano music was still playing. But for the first time in a long time, my world was quiet. The moment I stepped out of La Lune, I let out a long, heavy breath. The tension that had been building in my chest for days seemed to dissipate with that one exhale. The sky was a brilliant blue, the clouds were white, and even the sound of city traffic didn't seem so grating anymore. I didn't go back to the office. Instead, I drove down to the waterfront. I rolled down the windows and lit a cigarette, letting the cold Puget Sound breeze whip through the car and mess up my hair. My phone was vibrating like crazy on the passenger seat, alternating between Maya and Lucas. I didn't pick up. Everything that needed to be said had been said the moment I handed over those papers. Anything else was just useless begging and backpedaling. When the cigarette burned down, I crushed in the tray and picked up the phone. I ignored the dozens of missed calls and went to Maya's contact. Our last message was from last night. Maya, I'm heading out now. Good night, honey. Me, drive safe. How pathetic. I stared at the screen for a moment before hitting delete contact. When it was done, I felt like I'd finally finished a surgery I'd been putting off for years, cutting out a piece of dead tissue. It hurt, but the sharp pain was better than the slow rot. In the months that followed, I threw myself entirely into the West Side waterfront project. It was a massive undertaking, zoning, construction, tenant acquisition. It was complex and grueling. I built a dedicated team, and we spent every day in meetings, over blueprints, or on-site. Work is the best medicine for a broken heart. It leaves you no time for self-pity, no energy for overthinking. My legal team handled the divorce proceedings. Maya refused to sign at first. She made scenes, she cried. She even showed up at my office several times to corner me. I only agreed to see her once. That day, she wore no makeup. She was in a simple white t-shirt and jeans, her hair in a messy ponytail. Her eyes were puffy and red. She looked completely drained. She blocked my office door, and the tears started the moment she saw me. Caleb, we need to talk. I dismissed my assistant and closed the door. There's nothing to talk about, Maya. My lawyers explained the terms. I sat behind my desk, my voice detached. I'm not here to talk about the money. She stepped forward, hands gripping the edge of my desk, her body trembling. Caleb, I know I messed up. I was an idiot. I was blinded. Just give me this one time, just once. Let's start over. Start over. I looked at her, almost finding it funny. How? We pretend none of this happened. Maya, how could I ever trust you? Every time you're late, I'd be wondering if you're actually at work or on another date. Every time you smile at me, I'd be wondering what lie is hidden behind it. My words turned her face even paler. I won't. I swear. Never again. She sobbed. Lucas and I are over. The moment he saw those papers and realized who you were, he stopped calling me. He was a fraud. A total jerk. Whether he's a jerk or not isn't my concern, I said calmly. I just know that for him, you lied to me. That's enough. Maya, we're adults. We have to live with our choices. I gave you my love, not a license to betray me. That was the final straw. She collapsed to the floor, weeping like a helpless child. I didn't go to comfort her. I just watched her, feeling nothing but a strange numbness. The heart that had once burned for her had gone cold at that hot pot table months ago. Eventually, she signed. Our 3-year marriage ended in a way I never could have predicted. When the paperwork was finalized, I had her things packed and sent via movers to a small apartment she was renting in an older part of town. I didn't go up. I just stood by the truck, watching the movers carry the boxes. One box wasn't sealed properly, and I saw the ear of a plush bear poking out, the one I'd bought her. I turned away and started the car. In the rearview mirror, the gray apartment building grew smaller and smaller until it vanished. Goodbye, Maya. Goodbye to the version of me that thought love was enough. Epilogue, 6 months later. The first phase of the West Side waterfront project was completed ahead of schedule, and the tenant acquisition had far exceeded our initial projections. At the gala celebration, I found myself being toasted by everyone in the room. Feeling the weight of the alcohol, I decided to make an early exit. My driver dropped me off at my new penthouse. It was a sprawling modern space with a massive terrace that offered a panoramic view of the Seattle skyline. I stood out there, letting the cool night air sober me up. My phone buzzed. It was a message from an unsaved number. Caleb, are you awake? I walked past our old place today. The ginkgo trees are all yellow now. They're beautiful. You used to say that when the leaves turned, you'd take me there for a photo shoot. Is there still a chance for us? It was Maya. I looked at the text for a long time, the words feeling like echoes from a different life. I didn't reply. Just then, another notification popped up. This one was from Harper, my project director. She was brilliant, driven, and over the last 6 months, we had become an incredible team. Caleb, did you make it home okay? Tonight was a huge success. Everyone worked so hard for this. By the way, you mentioned being interested in contemporary art. A friend of mine is hosting a small gallery opening on Capitol Hill this weekend. Would you be interested in checking it out with me? I looked at Harper's message, then back at Maya's desperate, hollow plea. A sudden sense of clarity washed over me. I locked my phone and set it on the table, turning my gaze back to the city lights. The past was a closed book, and for the first time in years, I was actually looking forward to the next chapter. Story complete.